Morning. Not real great light in the room here, but it'll make do. Today we look at Deuteronomy 14 through 16. And it's just a continuation of, Moses' speech reminding the people of all that God has said to him. And chapter 14 begins with talking about improper ways to mourn the death of someone. And, it's one of those things that, it just seems odd to me that there would be an improper way, but it's not so much that, but it's, he says, you shall not cut yourself nor shave the front of your head, for you're a holy people to the Lord God. So that, when you're mourning someone else, you're not supposed to, cut your body and make, defect yourself and just, and it doesn't mean that we aren't supposed to be sad, because we are. And it's just, we hurt that way, emotionally and mentally we hurt, but, God is saying don't hurt yourself physically as well that way. And then the next, and there's just a couple verses about that. It isn't, he probably spent more time on it. I probably spent more time on it than they did, but, and then the next part talks about clean and unclean meat, things that they can eat, the different, especially in animals and in the sea world. Sea world, the things out of the waters, they're not supposed to eat like shrimp and crab and, some of those things that we eat regularly today. Of course, they weren't supposed to eat pigs either, and we eat those regularly today. Although there are some cultures that don't, and there are some cultures that tell us that do, that, man, you are just regular heathens, to eat something like that. But that we do eat that goes back to Peter's vision when, he's adamant that he's not going to eat that, and God's voice says, what I have made clean is clean, and so those restrictions have been taken. And every once in a while I see something come across, that things that we do every day that are sins according to the Bible. And that's one of them, eating pork or eating crab legs or shrimp and that stuff. And the reality is that, Jesus came to say, he did not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill the law. And some of those laws, we're still under the law of the Old Testament, but God has revised some of them, especially with what we can and can't eat. And so and there's another deal I saw just the other day, you are not supposed to cut your hair. Well, that was for the Nazarites, and for a male pledged to God, and Samson was one of those, if you remember. We'll read the story of Samson at some time. But, so it's taken things into the perspective, the proper perspectives and stuff as well. But, and so if we were to focus on this, these few verses here in Deuteronomy 14, we wouldn't eat a lobster or crab legs or shrimp, or we wouldn't eat, pork. And there are some things, some of these that we still don't really eat, and especially then when it talks about the birds of the air, and it talks about insects. I don't think I eat insects other than maybe accidentally once in a while, but you never know. But just different rules of what they were to and not to eat. And and if you find a dead animal, and I think, well, why would you want to eat something you find dead already, But anyway, the last part of chapter 14 talks about the tithing principles and again, it's this promise that when the Israelites would tithe, the first part of the crop, or do this, that God promised to provide more. And we can read stories about, people that say, that, I can give that first 10% to God, and I never run short on money or this or that or whatever. But God is saying, you know, if you remember me, I will provide for you. And it doesn't mean that God is going to make us all super rich or anything that way, but you know, when we watch out for others and when we're generous and looking out for the world around us, I mean, it's just a good thing for all of us. Chapter 15 talks about debts canceled every 7 years, and in my mind that's a little bit different, because you know 7 years was to be the Sabbath rest for everything, and then the 50th, the seventh of the group of 7 years would be the 50th year of Jubilee, when debts would be canceled and people would be set free. But you know, but it's just that reminder that you are created to be a free people, and things happen, and you know God's setting out ways to keep things in order. Being generous to the poor, it starts getting talked about in verse 7, and we see so many things in the world today that you know some of the poor and the destitute are left out or looked down and shunned and not taken care of properly, and some of the rich and famous don't seem to have time for it. But you know, that's again kind of generalizations, because it works both ways all the way. There are a lot of wealthy people that are very generous and outgoing and looking out for people, but it's that reminder to be the best person we can, to love the Lord your God, heart, soul, strength, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. It just and we hear words similar to that, you know, off and on throughout the whole Bible. Then we talk about bondservants, you know, slaves that way, and what they do and how they earn their freedom or, you know, service to others. And the law of firstborn animals, again, the tithing aspect of things. Chapter 16 is a reminder of the festivals, the Passover, the Feast of Weeks, the Feast of the Tabernacle. And these are the 3 times a year that, you know, it says it's required that, you know, a male Jew would go to the temple in Jerusalem and observe these. But later on it got to be that, you know, like at least once in your lifetime you should do these, but in Jerusalem. But every year you observe these, you remember. You know, you remember with the Feast of Passover, the Passover, the Jesus, you know, the Jews were set free, you know, from captivity. You know, remember it and teach your children. You know, I mean, this is one of the big things too, was to teach your children. And I think about that, and I mentioned that Sunday, you know, to teach our children. We need to get them so they know what their faith is based on. And so the annual ritual of the Passover, the annual ritual of the Feast of Weeks, you know, the first fruits given, and the you know, they're important to our community. It's just like, I mean, today the important church events of the year are Christmas and Lent and Easter. I mean, you know, and most people wouldn't put Lent in there. You know, they'd say Christmas and Easter. And, you know, Good Friday is, you know, if we didn't have Good Friday, we couldn't have Easter, you know. But it's that reminder to gather together, you know, to worship and to remember and to give thanks to God. The very last part of chapter 16 deals with justice in community, you know, to have judges and officers that will, you know, settle a dispute. They will pervert justice. They'll make sure that everybody is treated fair. And then, you know, you're not supposed, and then the last part, you're not supposed to plant a tree or a wooden image near the altar which you build for yourself to the Lord your God. You know, do not set up a sacred pillar. And it's, you know, just to make sure that you keep your worship and your lives in order. And to, you know, to pay attention to the laws that are given there. And it's just always a reminder that, you know, God is looking out for his people. And he knows that they'd been, captives for all of those years, and trying to teach them, how to do something different. And it's in a way, it's like with a daily devotion. Like I've been doing these for quite a few years now, but in the first, it was difficult and seemed strange, and now it seems strange if I don't do it. And it's just like anything we change in our lives. When you get to the age of you retire, or you get a new job, or if you're young and you have a family, things change in our lives that way. And this freedom was a big change for these Israelites, and they didn't know how to live that way. And we need to remember that change can be hard for people, and to give them the benefit of the doubt and encourage them and help them in all the ways they can. And that's what God is doing for his people.